Mirza Alekper Sabir, a merciless satirical poet. Mutual understanding, mutual trust between parents and children is one of the complex, eternal problems of humanity. Due to the lack of spiritual connections and basic mutual understanding between the closest, blood-related people, their relationships become so alienated that even the most brilliant novelist would not come up with anything like that. Due to the usual misunderstanding between parents of their sons and daughters, many destinies have been broken, lives have been tragically cut short more than once, the logically correct course of life has changed, lovers have separated, extraordinary talents have disappeared. The life path of the brilliant Azerbaijani satirical poet Mirza Alekper Zainalabdin Oglu Taherzade, who later chose the pseudonym Sabir, in Arabic, patient, perhaps would have turned out completely differently. If his father had shown a little attention to his son and treated his unquenchable desire to learn with basic human understanding, it is quite possible that Azerbaijani literature would have acquired an even more powerful poet in his person. Surely, a comprehensive systematic education would have played a beneficial role in the diamond cutting of this extraordinary poetic gift. But, as they say, history does not tolerate the subjunctive mood. The future poet was born on May 30, 1862 in the city of Shamakhi, the center of ancient Shirvan, in the family of a small trader. Young Alekper received his primary education in a madrasah, and at the age of 12 he entered the Usuli-jadid, new method, school, organized by the outstanding satirist, poet and educator Seyid Azim Shirvani, 1835–1888. General education subjects, Azerbaijani and Russian languages were mainly taught here. Shirvani quickly noticed the extraordinary abilities of his student and began to guide his first poetic experiments, actively helping him to comprehend the secret of versification. By promoting the development of Alekper's poetic inclinations, he contributed greatly to the satirical direction of his work. Seyid Azim continued to help his beloved pupil until the end of his days, playing a major role in the formation of his poetic views and worldview. Unfortunately, after studying for only 2 years, in 1876, young Alekper, at the insistence of his father, was forced to leave school and began working in the family grocery store. This forced work was extremely burdensome for him, and he devoted all his free time to self-education and his favorite poetry. As a result of many years of persistent study, the young man perfectly mastered the Arabic, Persian and Russian languages, thoroughly acquainted himself with the works of the classics of Eastern poetry, and deeply mastered his native folklore and literature. Having composed his first poem at the age of 8, he began his creative path with traditional Eastern poetry, writing lyrical ghazals, elegies, laudatory and mournful poems. While making a pilgrimage to the holy places of Islam, Mirza Alekper simultaneously traveled around Central Asia, Persia, Iraq and South Azerbaijan, trying to deeply study the life of these countries as much as possible. But in Ashgabat he was caught by the news of his father's death, forcing the poet to interrupt his educational journey. After his father's funeral, Sabir was saddled with the heavy burden of caring for a large family that was barely making ends meet. In general, it should be noted that material poverty haunted the great satirist for the rest of his life. Sabir's plight was aggravated by the fact that his merciless satirical poems were already widely distributed among the people at that time and brought down upon the author the malice and hatred of the local clergy, who persecuted the poet in every possible way, darkening his life. In 1901, he began to actively participate in the activities of the literary club of the Shamakhi intelligentsia, created by the famous poets Abbas Sahat, Aghali Bey Nays and Muhammad Tariq. Here Sabir honed his skills and perfected his poetic technique. His printed debut took place in 1903 in the Tiflis Azerbaijani newspaper Shargi Rus, Russian East. In 1905, his second poem Internationale, to fellow Muslims and Armenians, was published in the Baku newspaper Hayat, Life. In 1903 to 1905, Sabir actively collaborated with various newspapers and magazines, Debistan, Sad School, Zember, Gadfly, Irshad, Guide, Kajigat, Truth, Kayat, Life, etc. The years 1906 to 1911 became the most important stage in the poet's life and work. At that time he collaborated with the famous, brilliant satirical magazine Molla Nasreddin, 1906 to 1931. The magazine was subscribed to and read throughout the Near and Middle East, in the Muslim regions of the Russian Empire, and also in India. Acquaintance, cooperation and friendship with the publisher and editor-in-chief, the great satirical prose writer Jalil Mamajalouzade, 1866 to 1932, played an invaluable role in the formation of Sabir's poetic credo. The poet's first publication on the pages of Molla Nasreddin took place on April 28, 1906 in the fourth issue. It was the famous satirical poem, What Business Is It of Mine? From then on, until the end of his life, Sabir published humorous and satirical works in almost every issue, in which he ridiculed the backwardness of the environment, castigated the fanaticism, ignorance, and at the same time hypocrisy of the Muslim clergy, the ignorance of the common people, caustically condemned the behavior of the fat cats and intellectual parasites who flaunted external Europeanism. Calling on the people for enlightenment and spiritual emancipation, Sabir mercilessly branded in satirical images everything that hindered progress: the orthodox fanatic, the patriarchal father of the family, the intellectual who had broken away from the people, the hypocritical mullah. Despite all the persecution by the clergy, who every now and then set ignorant fanatics on him, the poet continued his struggle for progress. Political and civil motives prevailed in Sabir's poetry. He was a bright exponent of the ideas of the national liberation movement in Azerbaijan. The thematic scope of the works of the satirical poet is immensely broad and multifaceted. His attention was drawn to the darkest sides of society: religious fanaticism, ignorance, debauchery of the rich, merciless exploitation of workers, injustice, social contradictions. He also sharply opposed the confrontation between Shirism and Sunnism. There was practically no such big or small issue of socio-political significance to which Sabir would not express his attitude. Sabir created a new style in poetry. He wrote simply and clearly, knew how to combine living folk speech with literary language, and largely due to this, his poetic language was accessible to the masses. However, despite this external simplicity, the poems of the brilliant satirical poet conveyed to the reader the meaning of the most complex domestic and international problems. Sabir developed the educational traditions of the brilliant Azerbaijani materialist thinker, comedy writer and innovator M.F. Akundov, 1812 to 1878, in new socio-historical conditions, which were characterized by a sharp aggravation of social contradictions. Sabir created a new satirical school in Azerbaijani realistic literature. His poems reflected ordinary, everyday life, and their heroes were people from real everyday life. It is unlikely that another poet can be found in Azerbaijani literature who would say so many bitter words about his people, mercilessly criticizing and ridiculing their shortcomings. But the great poet always laughed through his tears, as if overcoming mental pain, and at the same time did not lose hope. He unwaveringly believed that the people would break through this pitch darkness into a bright future, and that merciless, sarcastic laughter would become the most effective elixir in this process of spiritual healing. Alas, this titanic talent was given a short life. A severe liver disease inexorably undermined his strength, and on July 12, 1911, at the age of 49, in the prime of his creative powers, the brilliant poet died. The poet's works were collected in a 3-volume collection, Kop name, the Book of the Hoopoe, and were first published in 1912. Subsequently, the creative legacy of M.A. Sabir in Azerbaijan was published in his native language many times, and in translations, in Russia, Iran, Turkey, Central Asian countries, Arabic, and also in European countries. The rich legacy of the merciless satirical poet has been studied quite deeply and comprehensively. Such famous contemporary comrades as the great prose writer and playwright, thinker and educator J. Mamajalouzade, poet-educator Sakat, poet-teacher Sheikh, and many others spoke very warmly and sincerely about his personality and work. Sabir's poetry was translated into Russian by talented poet translators and republished in Baku, Moscow, and Leningrad in large print runs.